Every year, on a Sunday in February, the United States and a big chunk of the world suddenly comes to a halt. More than 100 million people glue their eyes to the TV. They eat about 1.5 billion chicken wings, drink millions of gallons of beer, and scream their voices hoarse for men in armor fighting over an oval-shaped ball. Some people call it a religion. They call it the Super Bowl. But right in the middle of that storm, there's a group of people who are completely out of sync. And there's a good chance you're one of them. You're the person sitting there with a quiet question floating in your mind. Is that it? Same TV, same iconic moment. But your brain seems to come with a built-in shield that makes you totally immune to the hype. It's not because you hate sports, it's because the operating system inside your head is processing the world in a very different way. So why does your brain honestly not care about the Super Bowl while the rest of the world goes crazy for it? Let's break it down. First, let's clear up a common myth. That loving sports is some kind of natural instinct everyone has. In reality, the human brain is not born understanding complex rule systems like American football. We may have instincts for competition or winning, but to see a touchdown as dramatic, the brain has to learn a lot of things. The rules of the game, the context of the match, and the meaning of that moment. So when a crowd goes wild over a touchdown, it isn't a natural reflex like feeling hungry when we haven't eaten or pulling our hand away when we touch fire. Most of that excitement is learned and built up over time. Imagine this. You walk into a movie theater to watch part 4 of a blockbuster series, but you've never seen parts 1, 2, or 3. The people around you are crying their eyes out when a character sacrifices himself, while to you, it just looks like some random guy lying down. You're not heartless. Your brain just doesn't have the background data to understand why that death matters. Sports work the same way. To see the Super Bowl as exciting, the brain needs a huge library. The rules of the game, the history between the teams, the reputation of the players, and all the drama off the field. Fans have spent decades building this library. When the game starts, their brains simply match the information and trigger the excitement. For you, on the other hand, that library is empty. When you look at the field, your brain just sees a chaotic pile of muscular collisions. Instead of trying to decode a language it doesn't know, your brain chooses a smarter strategy. It shuts down your attention to save energy for things you actually understand. But knowledge of the rules isn't the only factor. There's another psychological mechanism that helps explain why some people feel a strong bond with a team, while others stay completely on the outside. In psychology, this phenomenon is called basking in reflected glory. Basically, when we connect ourselves to a group, the brain performs a kind of identity swap. It blurs the line between the personal self and the collective self. When the team wins, a fan's brain releases a large amount of dopamine, almost the same as if they had personally achieved that victory. They feel more powerful, more successful, even though in reality, they did nothing except sit on the couch and eat pizza. But here's why you stay on the outside. Your brain has a very strict identity boundary. You don't see that team as you. To you, they're just strangers getting paid millions of dollars to play football. Because there's no identity connection, your brain doesn't receive that free dopamine reward. Think about it this way. Celebrating the victory of a random sports team can feel about as strange as walking up to a stranger on the street and congratulating them for winning the lottery. You might politely say, "Congrats," but inside you don't feel excited at all, because the money isn't going into your pocket. For people who don't care about the Super Bowl, a team's victory is simply an event happening somewhere to someone with no connection to their own sense of self-worth. There's another major difference between these two groups. Their optimal level of stimulation is completely different. Imagine your nervous system as a funnel. Each person has a different funnel size for handling stimulation from the outside world. Some people can take in a huge stream of stimulation and feel excited by it. But for others, too much stimulation at once causes the system to start overflowing. The Super Bowl isn't just a game, it's a sensory storm. Blasting whistles, flashy commercials, tens of thousands of people yelling, and heavy collisions on the field. For fans, all that stimulation feels like a strong current of water that keeps their system running smoothly. But for you, it's like pouring an entire bucket of water into a small funnel. The result is overflow, and the system starts to overload. When the level of stimulation goes beyond what the brain can handle, it no longer feels exciting. It feels exhausting. That's why after about 30 minutes at a Super Bowl party, you might start looking for a quiet corner or checking your phone again and again. You're not bored. Your brain is simply trying to reduce the amount of stimulation so it doesn't get overwhelmed. And this is where things start to get even more interesting from a psychological point of view. Humans usually have a tribal instinct, right? Our ancestors survived by gathering into groups to hunt and defend themselves against predators. Modern sports are basically a perfect simulation of those ancient tribal battles. Team colors work like tribal flags, and when the home team wins, it brings a feeling of safety and pride to the whole community. But here's the key point. Not caring about the Super Bowl doesn't mean you lack social instincts or that you're some strange loner. It simply means you've chosen a different tribe. Think about it. Your tribe might be programmers who can spend hours debating the most efficient line of code. Or maybe your tribe is a community of book lovers, where connection is built through deep ideas about life. Instead of using football as a shared language, your tribe connects through knowledge, niche interests, or different kinds of values. You haven't stepped away from community at all. You've simply found your sense of belonging in spaces that don't need the sound of a game whistle. You find connection in places where silence, or meaningful conversations, is what brings people together, not an oval-shaped ball. There's another psychological concept that helps explain why the Super Bowl might feel discouraging or draining to you. Locus of control. Basically, it divides people into two groups based on how they see their power over the world around them. Some people are completely comfortable placing their emotions in the hands of others. They're willing to spend 3 or 4 hours worrying, feeling nervous, and hoping for a group of players they've never even met. They accept that their happiness or disappointment on Sunday night will depend entirely on whether a ball flies through the goalposts or not. This group has an external locus of control. But if you're someone who prefers to hold the steering wheel of your own life, this can feel very uncomfortable. Your brain is wired to favor activities where your effort creates the result. You'd rather spend those 3 hours fixing a broken faucet in your house, cooking a complicated meal from scratch, or even playing a game where every button you press changes the outcome. For you, watching someone else win while you have no way to influence the result feels like a waste of emotional energy. You want your emotions to be the real thing, created by your own actions, not borrowed from the success of someone thousands of miles away. To you, sitting still and hoping other people perform well isn't entertainment. It feels like voluntary helplessness. And there's one more thing. When you look at modern life, the reason you don't care becomes even clearer. You wake up to a flood of Facebook notifications, work messages on Slack, unread emails, and an endless stream of short clips on TikTok. We're living in an era where human attention is auctioned off second by second. Psychologists call this the attention economy, where every app, every billboard, is trying to hijack your brain's energy. For many people, especially those with more sensitive nervous systems, often called highly sensitive people, their brains are already running at full capacity all week long. When Sunday arrives, what they crave most isn't another loud event. It's silence. In that context, the Super Bowl doesn't feel like entertainment. It feels more like an extra shift at work. Imagine finishing an exhausting week and someone tells you, hey, spend another 4 hours watching an extremely intense event full of heavy collisions and commercials shouting in your face. Your brain's natural response at that point is a kind of shutdown. It says no to processing any more high-intensity information. Your indifference toward the game is actually a smart form of self-defense. It's your brain trying to recharge so you can survive the next work week. You're not bored. You're simply exercising your right to truly rest. Another factor that makes many people dislike sports is the long stretch of uncertainty. You never know the result until the final seconds. Fans call it drama, suspense, or excitement. But the truth is, not every brain experiences uncertainty in a positive way. Science has shown that people have different levels of uncertainty tolerance. For some, not knowing the outcome is an addictive thrill. But for others, several hours of uncertainty can trigger the brain's anxiety alarm system. Instead of feeling entertained, they start feeling stressed. Think about it. You're sitting on the couch, your heart beating faster, your palms sweating over an event whose outcome doesn't actually change a single millimeter of your real life. You don't get a raise if your team wins, and you don't lose your job if your team loses. For a brain that values stability and logic, accepting that much voluntary anxiety without any real benefit starts to feel irrational. People who don't care about the Super Bowl often prefer clarity. They would rather read a good book or watch a movie where they can control the pace, instead of handing their nervous system over to the randomness of a football game. For you, peace of mind is a much greater reward than dramatic suspense. And then there are all the traditions and rituals around watching the game. Let's be honest, the Super Bowl is no longer just a football game. It has turned into a massive cultural transaction. Everything around it is designed to force you to care, from commercials that cost millions of dollars to the dazzling halftime shows. There's a quiet pressure from society that says, if you don't watch, you're missing a piece of modern history. This kind of hype can feel artificial to people on the outside. You walk into a party and see people trying to get excited about a potato chip commercial, or passionately arguing about a singer they probably don't even listen to on a normal day. You start to notice something strange. People are performing excitement so they can feel like they belong. At that point, your indifference becomes a kind of quiet statement. You refuse to be pulled around by marketing campaigns. You refuse to pretend to feel something you don't actually feel. That sense of being out of sync can sometimes feel a little lonely, but deep down, it's also a kind of freedom. You don't need a cultural circus to define your joy. You're standing outside that ritual not because you don't understand it, but because you understand clearly that it's not for you. We've taken quite a journey to understand that not caring about the Super Bowl isn't some emotional flaw. But one question still remains. Why does your lack of interest make other people uncomfortable? Why is it that when you casually say, "I don't watch the game," some people react as if you've just insulted their deepest belief? The answer isn't in the football. It's in cultural consensus. Humans have a quiet fear of things falling apart. When hundreds of millions of people look in the same direction, they create a shared reality. That reality gives them a sense of safety and belonging. When you choose not to participate, even if you're not criticizing anyone, your indifference can act like a mirror, reflecting the strange logic of the whole spectacle. You remind them that this joy is actually a choice, not a rule of the universe. But step back and look at the bigger picture. A healthy ecosystem is a diverse one. Society works because we don't all experience the world in the same way. We need the passionate fans in the stadium to create energy, celebration, and those explosive moments that bring people together. But we also need people like you, the quiet observers, to keep the world from rushing in only one direction. Your indifference to the Super Bowl is actually a kind of perceptual anchor. While the rest of the world is swept away by the hype, you choose to stand on the shore and observe. You're proof that a person can live a full and happy life without following the emotional instructions of the crowd. You don't need a championship game to feel excitement. You find it in your own progress, in the quiet of an afternoon, or in niche passions that only a handful of people in the world truly understand. So if this Sunday you find yourself sitting in a quiet cafe, reading a book, or simply enjoying the calm of the streets while cheers echo from every direction, just smile. You're not missing anything. You're taking part in a different kind of victory, the victory of owning your own attention. Fans and non-fans can exist side by side like two different frequencies on the same radio. Both are necessary to create the colorful symphony of life. That's the real meaning of diversity. Your indifference isn't a wall, it's a doorway to other ways of living. Thank you for having the courage not to care. Thank you for being a quiet presence in a world that's often too loud. If you enjoy learning about how the brain works and why people behave the way they do, you should definitely watch the next video. There's still a lot you don't know yet. Click here to keep getting smarter. I'm Apex. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any videos. Goodbye, and see you next time.